dark goddess. It is that term, isn't it? And it does scare some people away.
I mean, I thought when I was writing it, no one is ever going to want to read this book. Like, who would want this book, right? So I thought, 5 people will read this book, but I have to write it. And then it turned out to be, as you say, like my best-selling book by far. It actually seems that far from frightening people on the whole, there's a recognition factor where people are actually hungry for that work and, like that they are aware of it, but to see it named or to hear it or to be invited into that work instead of being told, oh no, steer away, look the other way, we don't pay attention to that, ignore that, because we haven't been able to ignore it because it's actually a strong part of reality and magic and life and soul and all the things. So it's actually a draw. It's actually an attraction, the dark goddess. And there might be that unknown, that kind of thread of fear and uncertainty that goes with it, but it's not nearly as strong as the drive, the curiosity, the need for it.
I guess the next question has to be, what defines a dark goddess? Why is it? Why? The word dark is the scary part for a lot of people, I think, isn't it? What qualifies for a dark goddess?
Yeah, I mean, you said again that it's scary. I haven't found that people find it scary. Like, yes, they are aware and in awe and cautious maybe. Maybe there is some fear in there, but really I have found this overall hunger, need.
Right.
What defines a dark goddess? Well, I like to take many different definitions, and the simplest one would be to say that if the goddess is all things, and when we say that, there's a further stage down the line, and you can say historically or psychologically or whatever you want, where that goddess gets split into two, dark and light, or dark and bright. And that is echoed in many mythologies. The one that I particularly work with is the Sumerian cast of Inanna and Ereshkigal, the bright goddess who goes down into the dark to meet her sister, queen of the underworld. And, it's echoed in other mythologies as well. But so for me, that is the broadest sense of the dark goddess, is when we split, and we might split into night and day, summer and winter, inner and outer, all of the ways you can split things. So the dark, in this case, represents the mysteries. And whereas, just like nighttime, right? Okay, all of the nighttime things. Whereas the bright goddess, so Inanna, in the case of Sumerian mythology, she represents the courts and justice and divisions of land and, all sorts of bright kind of things. And she's the visible queen. But her sister, the dark goddess, the other half of her really, represents initiation, birth and death, transformation. And I always like to remind people, sometimes people use the term shadow and dark kind of interchangeably. For me, they are really, really different, because in the dark, there are no shadows. And I think that the darkness is really like a shared, space of the collective, I don't even want to say unconscious, the collective consciousness, where individuals aren't so important. Individuals are part of the whole, and those sharp differentiations where you get a shadow are lost, are gone. And part of the journey to the dark goddess is always giving up pretty much everything, and certainly any definitions of your personality or who you are. Whereas in the bright realm, the daylit realm, the Inanna realm, personality and therefore shadow are quite a big deal. And so for me, shadow work is actually part of the work of the light.
Okay.
And the darkness work is the surrender and the initiation work. And it's not really about individual shadows.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Now, in the book, you have covered several different goddesses. What made you single out those goddesses to work with?
They singled me out, Rachel.
Yeah, that's how it usually works.
Yeah. I only write about goddesses or myths that I'm really pretty familiar with.
Yeah.
And I'm not really necessarily familiar with them in an academic sense, although maybe I've read that stuff as well. I'm really familiar with them in an experiential sense. That is, I have walked by their side. I have created altars and rituals to them. I have spent days or sometimes months, journeying with their story and understanding how it linked to mine and working magic with it, really. And so the other two myths that I refer to in that book, although not as much as the Inanna myth, which it's really the whole book hangs on, are Persephone and Psyche, two Greek myths. Persephone is a goddess, and Psyche, I think, is probably not exactly termed a goddess. But those myths and stories, I work with those as well, parallel to the Inanna story. And I partly did that. Maybe I wouldn't even do that if I was writing this book today. Maybe I would just stick with one. But I partly did it to try and allow other people who might be working, say, with the Morrigan or Kali or some other version of a dark goddess to say, oh, it's okay. It's not just like this one way that we have to do it. I can thread my own mythology, the things that work, stories that work for me. I can parallel that into this work.